Morning guys, I'm here today at a little lake in Arkansas, and today I'm going to teach you how to skip a fishing lure. Okay guys, so the first step in learning how to skip a fishing lure is having the right tackle, and that all starts with the bait. And when I started learning how to skip fishing lures, I started with a jig and a beaver trailer. And the reason I like this setup for learning how to skip a fishing lure is because it has a nice flat surface on the bottom here created by that beaver, but it also has a pretty bulky profile. And when you're skipping a lure, you want to have a lot of surface area so you can have that bait glide across the surface. If you have a bait that's too narrow or has too many appendages on it, they're going to get caught up on the water and they won't skip very well. Also, you want a bait with a little bit of weight to it. It's pretty tough to learn how to skip a fishing lure that's really light or really heavy, so I like to start with like a 3/8 ounce jig, and this is probably the best bait to start out skipping with. So the next thing is the rod, and when I'm skipping a fishing lure, I like to use a pretty long rod, anything from a 7-foot to a 7'6" rod. And I like something with a lot of backbone, so either a medium heavy or a heavy action rod, just because you're normally skipping baits into thick cover like under boat docks or in bushes. And finally, you want a rod with an extra fast tip, or a rod that has a lot of bend to its tip, and that's going to help you get that bait going across the surface of the water a little bit easier. If your tip of your rod's too stiff, you're not going to be able to really propel that bait across the surface of the water. Next is your line, and I think this is one of the most overlooked parts of skipping a fishing lure. When I'm skipping a lure, I like to use pretty heavy line, anywhere from 17 to 20 pound test, and either throw a fluorocarbon or monofilament, it doesn't really matter that much. Braid is also a great line to start with when you're learning how to skip a fishing lure. I would recommend 65-pound braided line. Normally it doesn't backlash as easy as fluorocarbon, and it just skips like a dream across the surface of the water. So when you're learning to skip, use a pretty thick diameter line and you're gonna have a lot easier time. Okay guys, now that you got the right gear, we're gonna talk about the right technique to skip a fishing lure. So first off, when you're skipping any fishing lure, you always want to start with about 1.5 feet to 2 feet of line between your bait and the tip of your rod. This will give you a little bit of line to work with, and you can actually get a little momentum to get that bait going. The next thing you need to do is you need to make sure you have the proper underhand roll cast technique. And what I mean by that is a cast that looks like this. And a lot of y'all might think that you have that technique down, and I thought I did too, but about 10 years back, I learned from an old bass pro called O.T. Fears on how to properly roll cast. And the big key whenever you're roll casting with a bait caster is to make sure you keep your armpit closed. That kind of sounds a little bit weird, but what OT actually used to do at these old sports shows is he would put a $5 bill in the armpit of anyone who came up to the booth and said, hit that target right in front of me while keeping that $5 bill in your armpit. And if you do, you can keep the $5 bill. And 9 times out of 10, either the person would lift up their elbow like this and that dollar bill would fall out, or they would miss their target completely. And so you really want to make sure you practice keeping that armpit closed when you're making your skip cast. It's going to make you a lot more accurate and consistent like this. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you have a circular motion going with your cast. A lot of people might try to skip and go directly parallel to the water and try to skip a bait underneath the dock, but you're not going to be able to get the right angle to actually skip that bait. So instead what you want to do is you want to get a circular motion going with your bait and let that bait go right as it hits the bottom of that circle like that. Next thing you need to do is get the right angle of that bait actually hitting the water, and so you can actually skip it and glide it across the water like that. Now the way I actually practice getting this right angle is when I'm making some practice casts, I'm actually going to hit the water with my bait as I'm making my cast forward, and that's pretty much the sensation you want to have when you're making the skip cast. You want that bait skipping as soon as possible so you can get it as low and as deep into that dock as you can, just like this. You can see I actually made my first initial splash almost by my trolling motor rather than out by the boat dock. And the last thing you need when you're skipping a fishing lure is you need some pace. So you don't want to just leisurely throw that bait up there, or it's not going to skip, or you're going to get a big backlash. So instead you want to give that bait a lot of force and just be confident that that bait's going to skip once it hits the water. Now, another misconception about skipping a fishing lure is that you have to have a really loose spool tension when you're skipping with a bait caster. And I like to keep mine pretty loose as well, and that bait falls pretty quick when I press the button. But I can actually crank this drag down pretty tight. As you can see, that bait's just barely falling when I press that button, and I can still skip this bait underneath that boat dock, no problem. So don't get too concerned about loosening up your reel a ton. You can still skip with that reel a little bit tighter. And guys, that's about it. Obviously, it's gonna take some time on the water and some practice to get this technique down, but just come to your local lake for a day and find a boat dock and practice skipping underneath it, or even just go to a pond from the bank and practice skipping a fishing lure, and this technique is gonna become a powerful weapon in your arsenal. And once you get it down, you can actually start skipping four-handed, you can skip backhand, you can even skip left-handed, just to fish different situations and different scenarios, and you can help get that bait in areas that other fishermen aren't. So hopefully this video helped you learn a little bit more about how to skip a fishing lure. And if you enjoyed, hit like and subscribe down below. And also share this video with a friend who might not be the best at casting. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.